Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this first part in our two-part webinar series around body-worn cameras. A bit of housekeeping to begin with. As always, all attendees will be on mute for the duration of this webinar. However, we will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, and you can submit your questions for that via the usual channel, which is the Your Question box. We'll be sending out slides of the webinar to all attendees, and there will be a recording available in case you've missed it or in case you feel the urge to watch it again, pick up on anything that might have been missed during this session today. So we're going to concentrate on the bigger picture on body-worn videos today and cover what's involved in running a body-worn video system and how to position them to work in harmony with other elements of your personal security provisions. We'll be having a look at the Telo T8 specifically and the associated requirements that allow this device and its docking solutions to submit as legitimate evidence in a court of law. We'll also take a look at the Telo T8, what it can become with the addition of the Airsys.Cloud application, making it a complete solution for body-worn video and group communications as a service, or GCAS. Incidentally, GCAS is going to be replacing broadband push-to-talk, or BBPTT, purely as we feel it better describes the service itself. I think we can all agree that our solution is significantly advanced now, that broadband push-to-talk just doesn't do it justice, whereas group communications as a service gives it a much more encompassing feel. So GCAS is what we'll be using moving forward instead of broadband push-to-talk. So with all that in mind, let's get into it. So the first thing to suggest is, or start with, should I say, is why body-worn video, before we get into the detail of the bigger picture. Body-worn cameras are becoming more and more necessary when in positions of dealing with the public, sadly. There are major manufacturers of body-worn cameras claiming as much as 30% growth year on year currently, and certainly shows no signs of slowing. The market for these devices is vast, and the technology involved and the production numbers are making them more and more affordable as an option for most businesses where they might be required. So why the huge rise in demand? Well, firstly, the evidence gathered on a compliant solution is irrefutable. So for court cases and dispute resolution, the illegal act is literally caught on camera. Very tough to argue against a case when you're watching it back live on the big screen. So secondly, and mainly, the number of aggressive incidents and attacks is on the rise, and lockdown, believe it or not, hasn't helped this. So we thought we'd start with a few stats just to mull over for you. So directly related to the pandemic and the associated rules enforced, the Royal College of Midwives report that 7 out of 10 midwives have received abuse from women, partners, and families over the course of the last 12 months. It's pretty staggering, really, when you consider the type of work they're actually doing. BBC News reported the last year, 2020 that is, not 21, there were more than 3,500 attacks on ambulance and emergency care staff, and that's during a pandemic when we're all supposed to be indoors and in lockdown. Phenomenal, really. Network Rail has reported that in 2020 again, some 70% of frontline rail staff experienced violent acts towards them. I mean, that is a phenomenally huge number, isn't it? 70% of people that are working for the rail have experienced violent acts against them. It's amazing, really. And according to London.gov, attacks on bus drivers have risen 30% in the last 3 years in London alone. Again, it's a staggering statistic when you think these are people that are serving the public. Research by retail union US DOOR, Union of Shop Distributive and Allied Workers, as we all know, shows that abusive incidents towards shop workers have doubled since the onset of the pandemic, and that's with 42% of incidents in stores said to be violent. Again, that is a staggering statistic when you think that we're all in lockdown and we're supposed to be doing our shopping online. So just these stats alone really suggest that the need for body-worn video is fast becoming a necessity, and that's not even to mention the likes of police, security staff, prison staff, who unquestionably need this technology and the best version of it, really, for their own safety, but also for those that they're trying to protect. And which brings me on to the third and final reason for the deployment of body-worn cameras. They alone act as a significant deterrent against random acts of violence, and on their own have the ability to calm an escalating situation. So there have been multiple studies carried out in both the US and the UK, and I'm sure many other territories, that all determine those with body-worn cameras are significantly less likely to be involved with criminal activity or abuse over those that don't wear them. It's a pretty obvious outcome, but it really highlights the need for these devices, sadly. So let's get into the bigger picture. Here we can see the body-worn video element to the overall evidence management systems. Video and audio are probably two of the most important factors in conflict resolution. So it's vital that this is correct and compliant for anyone considering deploying a body-worn video solution. Having said that, it's not just the cameras and the various accessories associated, it's also the body-worn video evidence download solution initially, and the subsequent evidence management capability and the downstream process involved in its use. So these are things like removal of redundant footage, for example. If you've been recording for an entire 8-hour shift, let's say, and there was an incident of 10 minutes that needed viewing, it would be helpful to focus on that 10 minutes and not have to trawl through the full 8 hours. So that's one of the areas. Redaction, which we'll touch on a few times throughout this webinar, for the purpose of third-party GDPR requests or protection of identity of innocent parties, and that's blurring those faces, basically not wanting to be identified or of no relevance to any incident. Also blurring things like vehicle number plates that might be in shot. So in addition to that, it's worth keeping in mind that when using a redaction software, you have to also keep the original non-redacted footage for court review. So combining the body-worn video evidence with all the other evidence available to a full evidence management system, you can see here that there are a number of contributing factors to that all-encompassing evidence management system, or EMS. So with the help of the T8 and Airsys.Cloud, you're able to not only satisfy the body-worn video element, but also things like radio, audio, GPS location, it could be call audio, it could be witness interview recording. So you cover multiple elements of the above evidence management solution here, system. You also need to consider the rules of engagement for people using body-worn video, which we'll go into in more detail on the next slide. Our approach to all of this, and with everything from a solution point of view, is one of openness. We want to try and allow you, where possible, to use what you might already have available, or to help you buy what you need to meet your customer or staff or operational specific requirements. So please just talk to us about any opportunity. We're happy to collaborate with you and your customer to work the problem into the most viable solution. It's not a question of shoehorning a device and solution into the customer. It's about listening to the customer's pain points and trying to engineer the solution around those to try and alleviate some of those pain points. So into the interesting stuff now. The BS 8593 2017 Code of Practice for the Deployment and Use of Body-Worn Video, to give it its full name, is the standard which delivers a common framework to boost public trust in the understanding of where and when body-worn video can be used. The voluntary standard provides technical and operational recommendations for the appropriate and proportionate deployment and use of body-worn video. So the standard was drawn up to address a gap in guidance due to the difference between the use of CCTV and body-worn video, and to avoid a repeat of the privacy concerns associated with the widespread rollout of CCTV. BS 8593 covers planning and operational recommendations, which outline the need for body-worn video deployment to be based on legitimate reasons, particularly in terms of undertaking data protection and impact assessment. So a few examples of legitimate deployment of body-worn video can include things like safeguarding, employee safety and security, where a user of body-worn video might be at risk of physical or verbal attack, or working in a hazardous environment, like a Sainsbury's checkout, as it turns out. As a deterrent, it can be used as a deterrent if a device wearer is involved in policing or controlling an environment which people could try to disrupt. One of the key features of the T8 is that you're able to have the device with the screen pointing towards those being filmed, so they can actually see themselves, and that the fact that they're being recorded, which again in itself is a significant deterrence against continued antisocial behaviour, as we mentioned before. Evidence capture, of course, if the body-worn video user is involved in a role where they might witness or investigate criminal activity, capturing visual and audio evidence could assist with the future legal proceedings. Promoting transparency, where a device where regularly encounters complaints such as bailiffs or parking wardens, or again a Sainsbury's checkout as it turns out. Capturing data use or data to use in process of improving or training. So this is things like identifying learning opportunities, could be dealing with conflict at a Sainsbury's checkout, for example. What did they do right? What did they do wrong? How could they improve going forward? So the playback of these videos can help with the training element. Legitimate deployment example again could be device recommendations such as functionality, weight, image quality, and encryption. They're all covered in the standard, and separate clause covers data management and security, including data integrity, audit trails, storage, and of course sharing redaction. Training for the device wearers, data handlers, and general operator guidance is provided in the standard as well, along with a dedicated clause covering monitoring, escalation, and response as agreed with the system owners. So the standard is applicable to body-worn video users and system owners, as well as suppliers and procurers. Examples of where body-worn video systems might be used include security guarding, emergency services, warden schemes, prison or otherwise, parking enforcement, door supervision, all the areas that we've mentioned before, but also those other industry sectors that we might not necessarily associate with it, such as retail. Again, maybe those checkout staff at Sainsbury's, and I'm using that in a fairly light-hearted way, but the sad reality is that I was in my local branch only last week and noticed this kid who could be no more than 16, 17 years old wearing his body-worn camera, and the only reason for that is through necessity. So I'll reiterate that point from earlier, which is the growing requirement for this technology. It's no longer exclusive to those industries that we associate with it, such as policing and security primarily, but now the requirement for it is almost ubiquitous across any public-facing role. So we've mentioned B8593, we've gone into a bit of detail about it, but what does it actually mean? So it's the British standard for meeting the requirement of evidential gathering in this space. There are multiple items that need to be considered when using a body-worn video as A, a deterrent, but B, as a tool for resolving cases, what happened to who, where, and at what time. So if you need the latter to be used and stand up as credible evidence, the items that are required for it to be submitted as legitimate evidence, firstly from a device perspective, are this yellow sticker that you see here worn by the operator of the body-worn camera. Files must be stored on the body-worn video device and they must be encrypted. Files recorded on the device can only be viewed on that device with the use of a PIN. Metadata must be burnt into every frame, such as date and time. And there must be no capability to delete files on the device once recorded. So the only way to remove files from that device is by downloading them to a compliant docking station solution. So from a docking station perspective, whether you're docking to a PC or a physical docking station, the officer will need to use their personal ID and password to begin that download. Downloaded files are encrypted and stored in clear format. That being the case, the security in play is your organization's physical and logical security, and this needs to be up to the requirements of the standard as well, obviously. The docking software only connects to pre-authenticated body-worn video devices, and we'll touch on that as we talk about the docking station options a bit later. Once the files have been downloaded, they must be deleted from the body-worn device, as we mentioned before. So they're essentially moved from one device to another rather than being copied from one device to another. So the software has to maintain and even add to the metadata that's already captured from the device, and the file formats used must be MP4. Finally, an audit trail must be preserved for use in court, as we said before. So the courts will then use the files with the metadata and audit trail and you can use that redaction software to blur the faces and number plates of those not involved in the case. Redaction also has a part to play in removing others from footage provided in response to a third-party GDPR request, as we mentioned before. But again, as we said, the original copy must be kept for review by the courts behind the scenes. So let's take a more detailed look at the elements involved in the big picture. So we'll start with the body-worn cameras, of course, and these will be covered in detail in the second of these two webinars. But for the purpose of today's session, you only need to know that there are options available, and the best choice for you will be governed by yours or your customer's circumstances, direction of travel, or requirements. So the need for these devices, as we've already said, can't be understated, and the demand is growing by the day, it seems. We see more and more organisations relying on these devices to ensure the safety of their staff, unfortunately, but they are becoming a necessity. So the Telo devices that are on offer currently are the three we see here. That's the T2, the T6 and the T8. The choice, as we say, is down to the circumstances in which they are required to operate. The T2 works much like a wired RSM, if you like, and connects to your radio or compatible LTE device, as well as having a built-in body-worn video element, of course. The T6 behaves, again, as a wired RSM for your radio or LTE device, but also has a 2-inch screen, which can be useful for taking stills at a scene, for example. So these two devices are a great addition to incumbent devices that are already in play. The T8 is the all-in-one device, which has its own LTE capability. It's also built on an Android platform, so it can operate as a smart device alongside that body-worn video element. So technically, as it says here, it's an LTE cam, and we'll cover it off in detail during the next webinar in January. So that brings me on to the docking stations. So when it comes to docking stations, as always, there's choice, and the right one, again, is dependent on the user requirements. So the DSPC is a software that runs on a PC. This option is a very cost-effective one and supports up to 40 pre-authorized devices, and up to 4 devices can be downloaded at any one time. Now, remember, the docking stations can support pre-authorized devices, and that is a device that is registered with that particular docking station software to comply with the British standards. This DSPC offering supports up to 40 connections. The DS08 is a physical device, and it has its own built-in touchscreen PC, also with the software running on it, the evidence software running on it. And it supports 8 devices downloading at one time, and has like I say, an inbuilt touchscreen PC, and supports up to 80 pre-authorized devices. The DS20 is another physical device, and that supports up to 20 devices downloading at once, and you guessed it, supports up to 200 pre-authorized devices. You can access the DS08 and DS20 via the internet as well, so you can remotely access those physical options. All 3 options obviously have the ability to store files on their local drive, or to send the files for storage on a corporate storage device, which can be cloud-based or secure internal network, of course. So there are terabytes of storage on the DS08 and DS20 option. Downloaded and decrypted files are in open format for use by video editing or redaction software, or EMS, or evidence management systems, for the UK court systems. So essentially, docking stations are provided for the charging of devices and downloading and decrypting of recorded videos. The same features are true of the PC docking software. That tends to be used for widespread workforces, or those working from home or remote locations without access to the physical docking station on a regular basis. So, of course, the physical docking stations themselves are all drop-in, so they've got ports that you can simply drop the devices into, and that once you've entered your PIN, it'll start the download procedure. So, as I say, once you drop those devices into the ports, once the correct officer ID and PIN is entered, they'll start the download process. They also provide a video review capability, so you can play back the videos within the software itself and tag moments of importance. For example, So, for example, sorry. Files are then retained for a predefined period, depending on their classification or importance level. So the higher the importance, the longer the file is retained, and that can be predetermined by the customer or the users. On the docking station software, there's an element of admin capacity that allows you not only to create new officers or users associated with that particular docking station, those pre-authorized devices, but you can also create multiple docking station users with varying permissions or access rights. Again, this is all to control the use of the solution and keep it compliant with the British standards, as well as being flexible enough to meet the customer requirements. So as we mentioned already, there is a requirement in all of this to comply with third-party GDPR requests when it comes to body-worn video footage. This is where the redaction software comes into play. The files that Airsys body-worn video evidence management system provides are open MP4 files, so you or the customer are able to use any incumbent evidence management software that might be in play. The example we have here is something called CaseGuard, and these are images from the types of footage that you would ultimately end up with. So the video will play through as normal, and you can see the top right, the chap on the scooter is got their faces blurred out, same as the guy on the left with the on the bike. And then bottom right, you can see that those number plates have been redacted as well. So the video would play through as normal, but it would just take out those points of identity essentially. So as I mentioned at the start, you'll get a copy of this presentation, and this is just a really useful link that will give you an understanding of just what's involved in the full picture of evidence gathering. These guys actually have a really interesting solution that could be of use to us in this space, and it's basically an evidence consolidation tool, if you like. So definitely worth checking out when you get the presentation slides through. So we mentioned earlier on that the T8 in conjunction with Airsys.Cloud can really be all things to all people. It's our best-in-class professionally deployed group communications as a service platform, allows users of the T8 to access wide area comms over LTE, GPS tracking, indoor and out, British standard compliant lone worker protection, task management, guard tools, video streaming, emergency video streaming, and a host of other benefits that we'll discuss in a bit more detail next time out. So it's just to give you an idea of what the T8 can become in addition with the right software platform. In the meantime, Airsys as ever has invested in demo packs for T8, and we're happy to send them out to you guys, of course. There are limited numbers, so please do message myself, Richard, or the sales team to book a pack. And I think that just about wraps it up from me. The second part of this two-part webinar will look in more detail, like we said, at each of the body-worn video devices in the Airsys portfolio, and expand upon how each of them can fit into the bigger picture we've been talking about today. I believe we have a few questions, so I'm going to introduce Richard Webb, our Director of Software Solutions, and we'll get going with some questions there. Bear with me 1 second. So Richard, the first question is, what is the data requirement for streaming?
There are three options. The highest resolution is 500 kilobits a second. That effectively, if you're streaming over LTE, that will effectively require around 15 megabytes of data for a 5-minute stream. We can reduce the data rate, but obviously that reduces the resolution on the stream video. I think the lowest rate we support is 100 kilobits a second, so you will get 5 minutes will cost you 3 megabytes of data.
Okay, good. Are the T8s available for purchase?
Yes.
Yeah, we have good stock levels available, and we'll be getting some more in soon as well. Those are the only two questions, believe it or not. If anybody's got any more, obviously, please do drop us a line directly after the event, and hopefully we'll see you at the next webinar on Tuesday, the 11th of January in 2022. Sounds crazy to say, but thanks for joining, and that's it from us.